So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what is Scientology. A lot of people ask that question, so much so that the church even has their own book out called "What is Scientology." You're free to get it if you want. If you want to see their version of things, that's completely acceptable. A normal person looks at both sides of the equation. Somebody who's in a brainwashing cult does not. Typically, they only view it from one side, so Scientologists will not look at your side of the story. Just keep that in mind. Um, they count on you to entertain theirs, and once you entertain theirs, it's a very slippery slope from there. You can check out their side of the story if you want. They have a lot of information online. I don't really care if you do or not. I'm not gonna say don't. I'm just here to educate from my side of the fence. So Scientology is essentially the ritualistic exorcism of alien demons using a primitive lie detector. What I mean is that Scientologists believe that there are disembodied spirits which are stuck to you, um, basically being the Thetan, which people commonly call them Thetans. Talk about Thetan levels because of South Park. South Park was not far off the mark when they're talking about um, Xenu and all that stuff. I mean, that stuff really does exist, but simplified, that's pretty much what it is. It's exorcism. That's what Scientology is. It's basically trying to get rid of these disembodied spirits in hopes that you'll fix your problems. They believe that that getting rid of these disembodied spirits can cure things like cancer and AIDS and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, we'll throw it out there. They think that getting rid of these spirits will cure it. Um, so the Church of Scientology won't tell you that up front because Scientology has something called an acceptable truth, which basically means if they think it's too much for you to handle, meaning that it will turn you off from Scientology if you learn about it right away, they'll hold off telling you about it. Even so much to deny it. They'll tell you other things which might be true about how Scientology is an applied religious philosophy, blah blah blah. Um, there's one thing that they'll probably tell you about, which is called the study tech. The study tech is basically short for technology. Everything in Scientology is referred to as technology. Obviously, it sounds all very scientific because Hubbard believed he was a scientist. Um, and he wanted other people to believe that, so he made his stuff sound very scientific, which is why you have names like Scientology and Dianetics. They sound very fancy, and really, they're not. But anyways, that's besides the point. They have this thing called the study tech, which is basically how do I explain it? It's a way to study. It's indoctrination at the lowest level to change the way you think and the way you assimilate information to make Scientology more digestible. It breaks down, there are three parts to it. One of them is called the misunderstood word, which will be the most important one because misunderstood words are supposedly the source of all the world's problems, which doesn't make any sense. But again, besides the point, I can go into that later. But the study tech is basically, or the misunderstood word is basically when you're reading and you come across a word you don't understand, which I'm sure we all do all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've read words I don't understand. It's the reason my vocabulary is so big because Scientologists believe that, and Scientology teaches that anytime you come across a word you don't understand, you're supposed to look it up and look up the definition and look up the derivation. The derivation being the source of the word itself, tracing it back through its history all the way back to whatever language it originally came from. They believe that this is, and you're supposed to make sentences in your head and all this stuff, and they believe that doing this will allow you to study faster. Really, what it does is it breaks down your thought process into tiny little pieces, and you get stuck in the semantics of something, meaning the underlying or the individual meanings of the individual words rather than looking at the big picture. Because in Scientology, if you look at the big picture, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're so focused on that one little word and how the words line up and what does this word really mean there and what does this word really mean here. I mean, you can see that in excuse me, in this Jodi Arias trial. I mean, she gets into semantics, arguing about, well, I didn't really show it to him. I just handed it to him and stuff like that. I mean, Scientologists will argue stuff like that till the cows come home, because if you dig into the details of something, you don't let someone look at the big picture and they get lost. It's the old saying, can't see the forest for the trees. So that's the idea of the misunderstood word. It wants you to read each and every single little word when you can probably just digest the information as a big picture without having to know the meaning of each and every word. So that's the beginning of breaking down your thought process. So you're incapable of reading things for what they are. The next thing is this thing called lack of mass. It's basically, it sort of reverts you to a childlike way of thinking, which is where you demonstrate principles in the book using blocks and Legos and clay and whatever else, building up. It's a real primitive way of digesting information, and again, it's basically getting you lost in the significant, or in the tiny little bits of information rather than looking at the big picture. It wants you to focus on a single sentence or a single paragraph or whatever, so that you can't put everything together. Rather, you look at everything in little tiny pieces. And then the last part is called what it's called a gradient, too steep a gradient, meaning that that you're supposed to break things down into little parts. You don't start at the top. You start at the bottom and work your way up, which seems pretty commonsensical. You know what I mean? Like, you would already know that. You don't try to jump into something that's beyond your level of capability. Although I've done that many times and been successful. You don't have to always start at the bottom with everything. But this, I think, in my opinion, is probably the most significant part of the study tech and the Scientology indoctrination. This one idea, or this one concept about too steep a gradient, it breaks your mentality into that of a child. You start thinking like a child. You can't multitask. You can't do several things at once, or you can't skip a step. You have to start at the beginning with everything. And well, at least that's what this teaches you, and it doesn't really make sense. But the way it plays out in the minds of Scientologists in ways they don't even realize is well, it basically sets you up for this thing called the bridge to total freedom. In Long, they call it the bridge for short. That's basically where you start at this sweat sauna program, where you're supposed to sweat out toxins, even though it's been proven that fat doesn't come out of your sweat pores. But somehow Hubbard thought that toxins stored in fat you could sweat out if you sat in a sauna and took vitamins. Where he got that idea, I don't know, but it's been disproven many times. But again, Scientology chooses to ignore that. Scientologists ignore that. But it teaches you start from there and you work your way up to the OT levels, which is where you exorcise the alien demons. That's where you find out what Scientology is really all about. But the way they feed Scientology to you is one step at a time. You go on that bridge one step at a time, and you're not supposed to think too far ahead. Because if you did think too far ahead, you might think something's crazy. So this too steep a gradient, even though, I mean, the study tech is part of everything you study in Scientology. You're supposed to know it before you know anything else. It's the first thing you learn. And I think it really is the most important part of the indoctrination of Scientology, because of the way it changes your thinking. And it keeps you from reaching out for more. We all have, all humans have a natural inclination to curiosity. I mean, we're all curious about things. We want to learn things. The study tech stops that. It makes you afraid to read things that are too complicated for you, or afraid to study things that are beyond your level. And it does that so that you won't go too far ahead in Scientology. You'll let them feed it to you like they're supposed to. You'll take it bite by bite as somebody directs you along to do it. It basically sets you up to follow their path. And this is something that they try to institute in schools. It's called applied scholastics. They try to say that it helps children study. I mean, That is the best way to study, the right way to study. But really, all it is, it doesn't function in the real world. It only functions within Scientology. It only serves to make you afraid of being curious, because you're afraid you're going to come across a word you don't understand. And heaven forbid there's not a dictionary there. You might lose your freaking mind because you don't understand a word. And I've learned since being outside of Scientology that it's okay to pass a word you don't understand. And you don't have to go through the whole, I mean, there's this whole procedure you have to do just to what they call clear up a word. Um, you have to go through this whole ridiculous procedure where you find the definition that fits. Then you have to clear each and every other definition. Then you have to clear idioms. Then you have to make sentences with everything and study the derivation. And it makes you terrified to learn. Terrified to learn. It's awful. And it really messes with your head, like most things in Scientology do. So going back to what really is Scientology, it it's a fraud. I mean, it's deception, but it's exorcism. Exorcism at its most basic level. It sounds all scientific. It involves aliens, the whole 9 yards, but it's exorcism. And use this primitive lie detector, this e-meter that they have. So if anybody ever asks you what is Scientology, if you ever want to know what is Scientology, just remember this phrase. It is the ritualistic exorcism of alien demons using a primitive lie detector. That's all it is. Alright, I hope you're all enjoying my videos, and thank you for watching.